Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to dive into configuring an akYtec device called the MBC gateway. The MBC gateway is designed for bidirectional conversion and routing communication between Modbus RTU or ASCII via RS485 and Modbus TCP via an Ethernet interface. We'll walk through the process step by step so you can get your device up and running smoothly. First things first. Download and install akYtec Tool Pro on your PC. This is the software we'll use to configure the MBC gateway. Once you have the software installed, you can connect the gateway to your PC. You have two options, using a USB cable or an Ethernet connection. Here, we will use a USB connection. If you're connecting over USB, plug the gateway into your PC and launch akYtec Tool Pro. Click on the Add Devices button. In the interface field, select the correct COM port assigned to your gateway. Set the protocol to akYtec Auto Detection Protocol and click Find Device to let the software detect the gateway. Once the gateway appears in the list, select it and click Add Devices to include it in your project. In this video, we will cover both cases of interface orientation. The first is the case when the master device is in the Ethernet network, and the second case is when the master device is in the RS485 network. Let's begin with the first case. Once the gateway is added, you need to configure the interfaces. But before we begin configuring, let's explain the situation. Take a look at this picture from our user guide, which can be found on our website. Here you can see that we want to establish communication between a network master that uses Modbus TCP over an Ethernet interface and a network slave that uses Modbus RTU or ASCII via the RS485 interface. Direct communication between these two protocols is not possible. This is where the MBC gateway comes into action, bridging the gap between these protocols and enabling seamless communication. To make bridging possible, we need to configure each interface of the MBC properly, so it can communicate with devices on both sides and understand how to convert information from one side to the other. In our example, the network master is the PR103, which uses an Ethernet interface, and the slave is the MX110 module. Here we will open software for their configuration, ALP and MX110, and now we can begin configuring the interfaces. We will use automatic gateway configuration, since manual configuration is only required for systems with higher routing requirements. Therefore, we do not need the gateway settings node opened, unlike when using manual configuration. To set up the RS485 interface, first open the RS485 node in the parameter tree, and then open the MX110 software to read the network settings from it. Adjust the settings, such as baud rate, data bits, stop bit, parity. Now we can minimize the MX110 software and open akYtec ALP to read the network settings from it. The Ethernet configuration. Open the Ethernet node in the parameter tree, enter the IP address, and set the subnet mask. If you're using DHCP, turn it on. Otherwise, enter the static IP parameters manually, like we will. Next, you need to select the operation mode for the gateway. To do so, click on the Gateway button. The MBC supports different operation modes. You can set it to master in Ethernet, slave in RS485 if your master device is on the Ethernet network and the slave devices are in RS485 network. Alternatively, use master in RS485, slave in Ethernet mode if your master device is in the RS485 network and the slave devices are in the Ethernet network. Here we will select the first option and select RTU as the conversion protocol. Now, click the Save button, and that's it. The configuration has been set on the device, and now we can view the results. To do so, we will open ALP to view whether data is being transferred. As you can see, we are reading sensible values, indicating that we have programmed it correctly. But wait, there is one thing that we have not pointed out which is very important: byte and register order. As you saw on the MBC itself, we have not specified those orders. The reason is, that the MBC just copies bit by bit and passes it. The MBC does not use that data, so it doesn't need to know the data's order. However, the end devices must have matching configurations, so pay attention to this point. This was our first case. Now we will switch to the second case, where the network master is in the RS485 network. For this case, we will use PR103 as the RS485 network master and MX210 as the Ethernet network slave. Once the gateway is added, you need to configure the interfaces. But before we begin configuring, let's point out that the explanation for this case is similar to the first case, with the difference being in which interface the master and slave devices are connected. Here, we will open software for their configuration, ALP and Tool Pro, and now we can begin configuring the interfaces. To set up the RS485 interface, first open the RS485 node in the parameter tree and make sure the settings match the PR103's configuration. Now we can minimize the ALP software and open the window for the MX210 device to read the network settings and configure the MBC's network settings accordingly. Next, select the operation mode for the gateway by clicking the Gateway button and selecting the second option. The list that appears on the right side is the mapping list. It shows where the request for a specific ID will be sent. Once all devices are added to the list, click the Save button. Now that the configuration is set on the device, we can view the results. Open ALP and check the data being received. Here we can see that value is 1, indicating that first digital input is receiving signal. That's it. We have established communication over MBC. Important points to remember. In the RS485 network, avoid using address 1 for any devices, as this address is reserved for the gateway. If you are using the master in RS485, slave in Ethernet mode, the gateway can support up to 31 slave devices. That's it for the MBC gateway configuration. With akYtec Tool Pro, setting up your gateway is straightforward and flexible for various network topologies. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more guides. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.